Welcome to Simply Sheppey, your community podcast which aims to create and enhance connections within the community to build a better Sheppey. Hello and welcome to the Simply Sheppey podcast. This episode I am joined by Gary Walker, a fossil enthusiast who lives on the Isle of Sheppey and who runs the Facebook site Sheppey Fossil Forum, where people share their finds and discuss the best places to go. Welcome, Gary.
Thank you for having me.
So what makes the Isle of Sheppey so good to find fossils?
Basically, it's a site where you can just walk along the beach and you can pick up pretty much anything fossil-wise from the Eocene. So it's a marine environment. So when the creatures were dying, they would fall to the seabed and stir up the silt at the bottom of the seabed, and that would cover them up quickly. Because it's quite a silty clay, it preserves the fossils really well. So when they eventually get uncovered by erosion and the natural tides and everything else, they're still preserved in exceptional condition. Obviously, as long as you find them quickly after they've been exposed, then you get some fantastic finds.
Is that unique to the Isle of Sheppey or marine environments, or?
It's not unique to Sheppey, but the London clay has lots of different layers in it. So you get some layers that are very fossiliferous and other layers that are not so much. And we're just lucky to be on one of those layers that has a lot of fossils in it, really. And there are other locations with the same sort of things, but we're just really lucky, really.
So it's about, when you're talking about the levels of clay, it's about each layer of clay is sort of, it gets older as it goes deeper. And
yeah,
we
generally,
are on
yes, but you do get some folding in it as well, so it kind of gets a little bit out of order in some places, but it's generally, yeah, the deeper you go, the further back you go.
And are we pretty deep, or?
We cover quite a large range of it, to be fair. We cover about 4 million years worth of it, so that's a fair piece.
So it's a pretty good place to have a look then.
That's right.
And I love the fact that you can have all these folds and it can all get quite complicated. It seems like, it could get quite interesting once you start digging into it, couldn't it? I'm sure it does. Yeah.
I mean, you can see it in the cliff face sometimes. You get like a curve in the lines in there, so you can see where it's kind of folded up and where it levels out again, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, you can see it with your own eyes. That does sound fascinating. So you obviously know quite a bit about fossils and where to go and why we're so good to find them. So tell us a bit about yourself and how you got into this.
Basically, I've been interested in fossils and history and things like that since I was quite young. My dad used to take us to the beach all the time because we used to live in Sheerness, and we was literally just up the road from the beach. So whenever we went out, we went to the beach and fishing or crabbing or anything like that. And my dad was always very interested in finding things as well, and so I just naturally picked it up. He used to show me like sort of where to find shark's teeth and things like that, and it just kind of evolved from there. The older I got, the better at it I got, and the more fossils I found, the more I learned, and it just gave me that advantage, really. So
get in when you're young, or get your kids interested when they're young.
Yeah, I mean, it always helps to get interested young. If it's something you're interested in, you kind of always grow into it, and the more you learn, the more interest you gain. And hopefully, one day my boy will be the same, and the more I take him to the beach, the more fossils he'll find for me. That's the plan.
My partner's son, he tells a story where he was on Warden Bay. And this was a good sort of 4 or 5 years ago, and he still remembers to this day that he was walking along Warden Bay with his nan, and somebody came up to him and gave him a shark's tooth that they'd just found, and for him this was just like the best thing ever. He was like, oh my god, it's a shark's tooth, and he still tells the story sort of 4 or 5 years later. But of course, without the expertise, there was no way of us sort of enabling him to pursue that passion. But potentially we could have got into it further.
Yeah.
But this is, as we were saying, it is a perfect place to do it. So, which leads quite nicely into my next question, which is where can you go to find fossils? I've just mentioned Warden Bay and Shark's Teeth. Anywhere else on the island?
So basically, any part of the island that's got natural coastline has got potential to have fossils. If the London clay is exposed, then it's much better. I mean, you can find fossils along the beaches in Sheerness occasionally, very rarely, where they've been washed along by the tides and in the gravels and the silts and that. But you generally tend to find that they're quite worn and very hard to identify. But then obviously the closer to the cliffs you get, the better quality you tend to get. There is an exposure on the other side of the island as well at Elmley, but it's quite a small exposure, so not many people really venture there because it's a long way to go for not a great deal of work really. But yeah, the northern coastline, anywhere from sort of like the end of the seawall at Minster all the way through to Warden Bay, is generally the best area to go.
Okay, but make sure you take your wellies for for the clay. I've seen some discarded shoes in the boots around Warden Bay area.
You'll see quite a few of them.
Yeah, we're lucky though because we have the wellies and the kids love walking along the clay. I'm not so keen on it, but it's fun, isn't it? It's great, especially if you can find some fossils. Yeah. So once you're out there, what do you need to do? How do you find them?
So there's many different ways of looking for the fossils on the island. It depends on how agile you are as well in some respects. If you're quite steady on your feet and quite happy to walk for a long time, you can pretty much walk from Minster to Warden and back again on one tide. And you're just looking at the ground, looking at the rocks, just looking for things sticking out. The colours that you recognise once you get more used to it, the shapes as well, and you're just walking along. Really, it's as simple as that. There's no need to break rocks open or any of that on the island, like you do down on the south coast, and other areas in the country as well. You don't need any tools really, apart from a good pair of boots and maybe some waterproofs here and there, and a good bag. That's the other key piece of equipment to put stuff in.
Yes, of course.
But other than that, you can just sit down on patches of shingle and just sort through the shingle with your hands and just looking for teeth. And then obviously when you get a bit more used to it and you're looking for the nodules that have got bits of fish and all sorts of other creatures sticking out of them, and they generally, the fossils look like what they are.
Okay, because that was going to be
it's quite good on Sheppey because they're that well preserved that they look like what they are generally. You do get worn ones, obviously if they've been kicking around in the rocks for a long time, they get a bit beaten up, but you can still generally see like features like claws and legs and things like that of the crabs and the lobsters. You can see bits of fish teeth sometimes as well.
So if you find something, it might be sometimes obvious that you found a fossil, and sometimes it might be quite harder because it's a bit more worn. Because I see on your Facebook page, I'm fascinated, and they keep people post their finds, and I'm looking at them. I'm going, I don't know what that is, and people go, oh yeah, I know what that is. That's I can't give you an example, sorry. And I'm like, how on earth do you know? How on earth do you know what they are? But obviously, with experience, you would be able to, and you can share it with the fossil forum as well. But before we get to that, you've gone to the right place. You found what you think is a fossil. What do you need to do with that fossil then?
So again, it depends on the condition of what you found. A lot of the times, especially with the crabs and things like that, you pick them up and quite a lot of it's exposed already. So you can see the legs, the claws, or the carapace quite often. So you don't really have to do an awful lot. to those sorts of fossils. And sometimes you find them and they're a lot more encased in the rock. So those ones are a bit more tricky. You can sometimes get away with it if they're quite soft. You can get away with just using like a scalpel or just a pointed tool, a long nail or something like that, and you can just sort of push the rock away. And other times when it's quite thick into the nodules, you kind of have to use more aggressive tools. So you're looking at your like engravers, your air pens and air abrasives and things like that. But generally, the fossils that most people find are pretty much ready to go. So they don't generally pick up the ones that are encased in the rock because they don't recognise them.
Makes sense, yeah.
So it's only really the enthusiasts and the people that have done a bit more research that kind of find the harder to prepare ones. So it's generally okay.
Is it okay to take them home?
Yeah, generally yes. It's one of those where over the years there's different rules and regulations around the country. You kind of have to check wherever you're fossil hunting, really.
Okay.
But on Sheppey, it's generally accepted that they are fair game to take. If you find anything that could be of potential significance, so if you're finding something that's a new species or could potentially be something that's never been found before on the island, or it's something that's in such good condition that it might have scientific value, then you generally do need to let the authorities know. So you need to be letting like the National Fishery Museum know, and just to make them aware that you found something that could be of some significance.
Okay.
Sometimes they'll reply and just say sort of like, well done, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Other times they might be more interested and really sort of would like to acquire it from you. So it's one of those. It's you need to kind of play fair. You need to be making sure that people know that the significant things are being found.
Okay.
But generally, yes, it's accepted that you can keep everything you find.
Okay. And of course, in order to find out if it's something significant, you could share it, for example, on the Sheppey Fossil Forum on the Facebook.
That's right.
Or you could consult some, I mean, I'm sure there's quite a lot on the internet in terms of being able to decide what your fossil forum is. It's a fantastic resource, is it not? The internet. We can all be armchair experts, can't we?
That's right. Definitely. It's one of them that you can find out as much information as you want to with fossils, and if you want to know a lot, you can learn a lot quite easily online. And the things you don't know, someone else does, and they will tell you generally.
Generally, yeah. I mean, the forum seems very supportive. So that's a really good resource there. Do you have to preserve the fossils once you take them home, or they?
Sometimes, yes. Some of the fossils are a lot more stable than others. It depends on their preservation. Some fossils are preserved in pyrite, which is quite unstable, but occasionally you can find stable versions of it. So it's one of them you kind of have to just be vigilant over the things that you've found. If there's a lot of obvious pyrite on a fossil, then it kind of gives you a warning sign to keep an eye out on it. But generally, just simple preservation techniques that are used on them. I mean, some of the fish material, they just put like a thin layer of varnishing, or you can use paraloids and other sort of things like that. It's a very technical field when you get into what preservatives you can use, and it's also a personal choice as well. Sometimes you decide what you think looks best on your fossils, and you kind of go from there. I don't tend to do an awful lot with mine, and I try to keep them as natural as possible, but some of them you do need to preserve.
Okay, so if you were an amateur or a birding enthusiast, you might not worry about the preservation process at that point. It might not be until you've got into it a little bit more that you start worrying about that, and you start getting a bit more into the technical sides of things and learning, what did you call it, pyrite?
Yes.
And learning how to look for pyrite and what that looks like and stuff.
Yeah. And you've also obviously got the option that if you do find something and you don't know how to prep it, or you don't know how to preserve it, you can ask for professional advice. There's many preservators and prep specialists as well that will take the fossil away. They'll do everything that needs doing to it and send it back to, obviously, for a price. But yeah, it's very a personal choice. You can, whatever you really want to gain from it, I suppose.
It makes sense, but I can see that if you found something that's special and you want to keep it, then you're going to go through that process, aren't you? Because you found it and it's yours, and you're going to want to keep that.
That's right.
Yeah. So talked quite a lot about how to find them and what to do with them. What kind of things, and you've talked quite a lot about finding the crabs and shark's tooth and things like that. Is it just sort of around sea life, should I call it, or is there more to it than that?
Generally it is just the sea life, but you can very rarely find some of the other stuff as well, so like bird material, and you get quite a lot of tropical kind of material as well, so seeds from like palm trees. You can also find sort of like actual wood as well, so you can find whole trunks of trees just preserved on the clay, which are quite spectacular sometimes. I mean, I found one a few weeks ago out on the foreshore, which was about 16 meters long, which is quite a sizable chunk of wood.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not in your front room at the moment.
Oh no, that's still where it was. But yeah, some of the bird material is quite spectacular, and I mean, you also get sort of mammal material as well, occasionally, very rarely. So you're talking teeth and things like that. But yes, generally marine stuff. So yeah, the crabs, lobsters, shark teeth, fish, turtles, even crocodile, nautilus as well. It's amazing to think that they were around so far back then, and they're still around now, pretty much in the same shapes.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing about fossils. You don't just learn about fossils, do you? You learn about history, and you learn about geology, and you learn about the island, and it becomes, you become sort of more connected to it, don't you? I think. What's the best thing that you have found?
So a couple of years ago, I found a complete turtle.
Oh wow!
Which has also got its skull as well, which is quite uncommon to find. Turtles are very uncommon anyway, but to find the whole carapace and the skull as well is quite rare, and very few turn up together. You can occasionally find the carapace and then the skull later on, sort of nearby, and they fit together. But the one I found, I mean, I've got it here.
Fabulous.
It's only a little one, but you can just about make it out.
Goodness me, that's amazing.
On the back there, this piece here is the skull. You can kind of see the eye orbits.
Yes, I can see that. I don't know if I'd have recognised it if you hadn't pointed it out, but that's incredible.
Yeah, it was definitely the highlight of my fossiling so far, that one.
Did you just walk along and you found it, or did that take some...
All that was exposed when I found this was that tiny little corner there.
And you had to dig it out?
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I was just walking along, looking at the ground, spotted something. It was a bit orange, which was unusual for when you're out there. So I looked a bit harder at it and then found what it was. So you kind of just look for things that stick out, basically. It's things that don't look like they should be there.
Okay.
And then you focus in on those, and you can turn up anything, really.
Do you know what's the best thing that's been shown to you, or what's the best thing that's been found on the Isle of Sheppey?
So, I mean, there's been some fantastic fossils found on the island over the years. I mean, people have been picking up fossils here for hundreds of years. And Some of the stuff I've seen in museum collections is spectacular. One of the other local collectors has got all sorts of material as well, some fish skulls that are sort of this sort of size and things like that. But he's also got probably the best thing I've seen so far is a bony toothed bird skull.
Okay.
Is phenomenal. You can see all the ridges on the teeth, or pseudo teeth. It's got the whole cranium and everything else with it. So that's probably the most spectacular thing I've seen so far.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking there's a bird that has teeth.
Well, they're not real teeth, but it's like protrusions on the beak. Yeah.
That sounds incredible. So are we doing enough on the Isle of Sheppey to preserve these fossils? You know, people have been hunting them for hundreds of years, but obviously more recently there's been more population on the island, there's been a huge amount of coastal erosion. Are we doing enough?
So on the island itself, we don't really have too much in the way of like a fossil museum or anything like that. Probably the best we got is the Gatehouse Museum. They've got a floor that's got a few cases of fossils in there from local collections. But generally, it's all personal collections, and you don't tend to see them sort of displayed anywhere, which would be ideal, really. I'd love to see them displayed in a museum properly. But you do have collections in like the bigger museums. So Maidstone Museum's got some, Sedgwick Museum, and obviously the big museums in London. They've got big collections, but generally they're like the History Museum, for example. They've got a huge collection, but a very small section of that's actually on display. Maidstone Museum's got a reasonable size collection on display.
Okay.
But then other than that, it's very little.
So potentially there's an opportunity there for some display, even if it's potentially just an exhibition, perhaps, where people can bring along their private collections and display them for a temporary amount of time. That'd be something worth considering, actually. And in terms of the fossils themselves, I mean, are they at risk? I apologise for my ignorance. You're going to have to educate me here. But there's part of me that worries that with more people on the island and with the coastal erosion, that these fossils are going to get lost, or they're going to get eroded, or we're going to lose part of the history of the island. Or am I worrying about something that doesn't need to be worried about?
So when it comes to fossils found on the coastline, you generally only find in a small selection of what is there. The amount of fossils lost to the tides and the erosion is probably huge, to be fair. You're always going to get that. You're never going to save every fossil. It's just physically impossible. But generally the island's population, the majority of the population don't even know they exist. So it's one of those, they're not really having an effect. The erosion itself actually gives you the opportunity to collect them.
Okay.
So they are eroding from the cliff, they are eroding from the foreshore as well. But the fossil to clay ratio is ridiculously small. So for every one fossil you find is probably, I don't know, 100 meters of clay or something like that. So the amount of clay that we lose from the cliffs and the amount of fossils that we lose from within that, it's anyone's best guess, really. But the erosion itself generally helps us.
Okay.
As it moves material for us.
Fair enough. I'll stop worrying about it anyway. So when you're fossil hunting, how do you make sure that you stay safe?
So I always make sure to check the tides. That's the key thing for any coastal area. You check the tides to make sure that you're not going to get wet, basically. Then the other thing is to know your surroundings as well. So you learn very quickly what's safe to walk on and what's not. And you see all the reports in the news about people getting stuck in the soft mud and things like that. There's generally plenty of warning. you're walking along and your feet start to sink a little bit, and you start thinking, right, okay, this is a bit soft. So you generally change your direction, or you change the area you're looking at. You don't carry on walking until it's to sort of waist deep. But yeah, generally it's just using your common sense when you're on the beach, and making sure that someone knows where you are, and you've got a means of calling for help. So mobile phone is obviously quite important, and just being aware of the tide. So if you're going to plan to be on the beach for a long time, and you're not sure what time the tide is, then just keep making sure to look. Cut off points as well. When we get a lot of rainy weather, the cliffs actually, all the mud and some of the clay slides down the cliff, so you end up with like a flow of horrible, sticky, muddy yuck, basically. And if one of those happens when you're on the beach, you need to know that there's another way for you to get off the beach. And so you need to always be aware of how you can get off the beach if you need to, or where you can stay safe while you wait for the tide to go back out, and things like that, It's all about just knowing your surroundings, really.
Okay, so if you're new to the island, or if you've come here for a week and you're staying in a caravan and you want to do a bit of fossil hunting, best thing to do is to stay in the more populated areas, and rather than sort of venture into the depths of the clay around the back of Borden Bay. But if you are a regular visitor, then certainly you can get to know the area a little bit better, and work with the tides and the mudslides, especially, as you say, in times of heavy rain.
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. So this podcast is also about the Isle of Sheppey as a whole, and not just about the wonderful fossil hunting. So what is your favourite thing about the Isle of Sheppey?
So my favourite thing about the island is the scenery. And we've got some fantastic scenery here that most people don't even realise we have. Some of my favourites, obviously, the cliff lines. The geology in the cliffs, and the way that they rise and the way that they slope and things like that is a fantastic sight. But then we've also got the nature reserves as well. The wildlife and everything that comes with it is spectacular. What more could you really want from somewhere so close to, big towns and cities? You're not going to get that in too many places,
No, you're not. And I think because of the lockdown, people have been exploring those places a little bit more, haven't they? And becoming more aware of the amazing places on the Isle of Sheppey that you can go, because they're forced to sort of walk locally. And I've been doing these podcasts now for a while, and this comes up a lot. It's like, Sheppey is amazing, the nature, the views, the beaches, it's just a wonderful place. So I think we need to value that and cherish it. But it has all these wonderful things. What do you think that the Isle of Sheppey needs to do to be a better place to live for everybody?
So generally the island's got quite a good community spirit, and people will rally around if they need to. But I think we can learn a lot from past generations in that respect, where things where something maybe not quite as good as it should be, we tend to, especially on social media now, we tend to complain more about the things that need doing, as opposed to actually trying to enact something to fix the problem. I think that's something that the island definitely needs to do more of. We've got some good groups, good pockets of people that do those things, the beach cleans and tidying up in near the bridge and things like that. But we need more people to take more responsibility of their surroundings, and just the general upkeep of the area. People complain a lot about how dirty places look and how things look run down, but they have no ideas, and they won't put their time in to help to change those things. A lot of people make light work of big jobs.
This is true. There potentially needs to be more drive and more ideas. I think it's easy to get to a place of complacency. I'm not quite sure that's the word, but where people don't feel that they can make a difference anymore. you know, and it's almost like it needs to be reignited, you know, and we need to find a way of doing that as an island. And I do agree with you, actually. I think there is a lot of really good stuff going on out there. I mean, I know there's an organisation called Sheppey is Ours, run by Kaylee Roussel, and she's really trying to drive change forward. But it's about getting people on board, isn't it? And it's about sort of lighting that fire under them and saying, yeah, it's worth it, go on, you know, let's all work together. But yeah, I do agree that the potential is definitely there. I mean, you can see it wherever you look, that people help each other, and over the lockdown people have really rallied. But it's about sort of linking all of that together as to drive bigger changes, because you need more people to drive bigger changes, and you need more energy and more drive. So I couldn't agree with you more there. I think it's a fantastic point you've made. And that was really, really interesting podcast, and I've learned so much. Thank you, Gary. I apologise for not knowing a huge amount of about fossil hunting, and thank you for keeping your language sort of simple for me to be able to grasp it. If anybody does want to learn any more about fossils, Gary Walker's Facebook site, the Sheppey Fossil Forum, is there for you to share what you found, or just to watch for a bit and find out what's going on. And there are other great resources on the internet in order for you to help hunt fossils. Just remember to respect the beach as you're doing it. Don't leave any litter. Be safe and look after others. Thank you very much, Gary, for being with us today. And thank you to all of our listeners. Remember, this is your podcast, so if you would like to get involved in any way, please let us know on our Facebook page at Simply Sheppey. Thank you.